Okay, let's dive right into this gripping explainer about René Descartes. This is a story where reality itself basically becomes the prime suspect. We're going to look at the life of the man who literally became the father of modern philosophy, and he did it by completely tearing down everything he thought he knew. We'll explore how a guy sitting all alone in a room, doubting the very hands attached to his own body, somehow ended up changing human history forever.
Picture this. It's February 1650. We're in a freezing, ice-covered palace in Sweden. It's 5 a.m., and a frail, coughing man is trudging through the bitter cold. That man is René Descartes. Now, you really have to wonder, why did the absolute genius who doubted his own existence, a man who theorized that the entire physical world might just be a false dream, walk willingly into the freezing jaws of death in a foreign land? What was the terrifying truth hiding in his books that made him hide his identity and address for 20 long years, only to end up here, summoned by a stubborn Swedish queen? The history books neatly tell us he just caught pneumonia. But, for a man who questioned every single truth in the universe, was his death really that simple?
All right, let's get into Section 1, Death and Questions, a chilling mystery. To really understand his tragic end in that freezing Swedish winter, we have to rewind and look at the incredibly comfortable, warm habits of his early life. Born in France in 1596, Descartes sadly lost his mother when he was just a year old. By the time he was 10, he was sent away to a highly prestigious Jesuit school called La Flèche. Because he was such a frail and sickly kid, his teachers actually gave him a special exemption that absolutely no other student had. He got permission to stay in bed until 11 a.m. every single day. While the other kids were up freezing at dawn, Descartes spent his mornings just lying in his warm bed, untangling his thoughts. And it was this habit of deep reflection that he kept up for his entire life. Moving on to Section 2, Truth and Mathematics, Finding Certainty. While he was at school, Descartes had a realization. He saw that education was essentially just based on the conflicting opinions of ancient philosophers like Aristotle. To him, there was no absolute truth in any of it. In 1616, just to please his dad, he actually gets a law degree. But he completely refuses to become a lawyer. Why? Because he sees lawyers just arguing over opinions. Again, no undeniable truth there. So he just leaves. He decides he's going to learn from the book of the world. By 1618, he joins the Dutch army. Not to fight, but as an engineer using math to aim cannons and design structures, mostly just as an excuse to travel. Then comes a massive turning point. He's walking in the town of Breda and sees this highly complex math puzzle pinned to a wall. He asks a stranger to translate it for him. Well, that stranger turned out to be Isaac Beeckman, a brilliant scientist who challenged him to solve it. Descartes did it, easily. Beeckman showed him that physical problems could actually be solved with math. For Descartes, mathematics, where 2 plus 2 is always exactly 4, held the absolute, undeniable certainty that he was so desperately craving. This led to a major breakthrough. On a freezing cold night in November 1619, while stationed in a tiny, stove-heated room in Germany, Descartes had 3 intensely vivid dreams. He woke up interpreting these dreams as a divine message to unify all human knowledge using the certainty of mathematics. But to build this new house of truth, he realized he first had to completely demolish the old one. So he created 4 rigid mathematical rules to rebuild all human knowledge from scratch. And the absolutely crucial one? Step 1. Accept nothing as true unless it is completely undeniable and totally free of all doubt. Which brings us to Section 3. The Demon of Doubt, Questioning Reality. Having set up his rules, Descartes begins this terrifying descent into radical doubt. First, he attacks his own senses. Think about it. Our eyes and ears trick us all the time, right? Like an optical illusion. If they deceive us even once, how can we ever fully trust them again? Then, he goes even deeper. I want you to ask yourself right now, sitting there, how do you genuinely know you aren't sleeping? When you dream, you run, you talk, it feels entirely 100% real. Descartes realized there was literally no definitive test to prove you aren't dreaming right at this very moment.
But wait, he doesn't stop there. He pushes this doubt to the absolute limit. What if there is no God? What if, instead, there's a supremely powerful, infinitely cunning evil demon? A demon whose entire existence is dedicated to tricking your mind. What if the sky, the earth, the colors you see, the shapes around you? What if even your own physical hands and body don't actually exist? What if it's all just a complex, massive illusion fed directly into your mind by this demon? He essentially stripped away the entire universe.
Let's look at Section 4, I think, therefore I am, the first truth. Now plunged into total darkness, stripped of his body and his reality, Descartes searches desperately for just one unbreakable truth. Is there anything at all that this evil demon cannot fake? And then boom, he finds it. This is probably the greatest philosophical mic drop in human history. Descartes realizes, okay, the demon can trick me about having a body, the demon can trick me about the sky above me, but the demon absolutely cannot trick me about the fact that I am doubting. And if I'm doubting, I must be thinking. And if I'm thinking, well, I must exist to do the thinking. I doubt, I think, therefore I am. He proved that the very act of being deceived requires a mind that actually exists. No ancient books needed, no teachers needed, just pure, unfiltered human reason proving its own existence.
Moving right along to Section 5, Body as a Machine, Mind-Body Dualism.
Having proved his mind definitely exists, Descartes now has this huge task. He has to rebuild the rest of the physical world. To do this, he turns back to logic. He looks inside his own mind and finds the idea of a completely perfect, infinite being, God. Descartes argues it like this. I am a flawed, doubting, imperfect human. An imperfect being like me cannot just invent the concept of absolute perfection out of thin air. It's like how heat can't just magically come from something freezing cold. Therefore, the idea of a perfect God could only have been placed there by an actually existing perfect God. And because this God is perfect, he cannot be a deceiver, because deception is a flaw. Just like that, the evil demon is defeated. Since God isn't tricking us, we can safely trust our senses to observe the physical world, as long as we use careful reason and mathematics. And this amazing conclusion leads directly to his famous concept of mind-body dualism. He essentially splits the universe in two. On one side, the mind is just formless thought. It takes up zero physical space. The body, on the other hand, is merely physical matter, taking up space. It's literally just a machine. Trees, rocks, and even our animal bodies are just biological machines made of matter. This was a massive game changer, because it allowed scientists to finally study the human body mechanically, without the religious fear that they were violating the soul.
But of course, this dualism created a totally new, massive problem. If the mind is a formless ghost, and the body is just a physical machine, how on earth do they actually talk to each other? When your formless mind decides to raise your hand, how does the physical hand get the memo to move? Descartes actually spent a lot of time in butcher shops, cutting open and studying animal brains to figure this out. He noticed that most brain structures come in pairs, a left and a right side. But right in the dead center of the human brain is a single, tiny structure, the pineal gland. He theorized that this tiny little gland was the exact bridge between the ghost and the machine, the steering wheel where the soul controlled the physical body.
And finally, Section 6, Father of Philosophy, Modern Thought.
So how do you actually survive in a chaotic world with these ideas? Descartes wanted to avoid the terrible fate of scientists like Galileo, who were severely punished by the church. So he literally hid out in the Netherlands for 20 years, moving houses over 24 times, just to be able to think in peace. While he was there, he lived by 4 practical rules. First, follow your society's laws so you can live peacefully while searching for the truth. Second, be decisive. He had this great analogy. If you're lost in a dense forest, don't just wander in circles, constantly changing your mind. Pick a straight line and just keep walking. Third, and this is huge, change your desires, not the world. He realized that the absolutely only thing we have total control over is our own thoughts. We can't control our health, our wealth, or the world around us. True freedom is mastering your own mind. And fourth, devote your life to the work you actually love. Which sadly brings us right back to that freezing Swedish morning in 1650. Descartes had actually broken his own rules to care for a sick friend and wound up catching severe pneumonia himself. When Queen Christina's top doctors arrived, their so-called medical science dictated that they should cut his veins and bleed him to get rid of the bad blood. But Descartes, completely trusting his own mechanical understanding of the body, flat out defied the doctor's blades. He knew that bleeding would only weaken his bodily machine even further. He told them to leave him alone and let him die in peace. On February 11, 1650, he calmly stated that his soul was ready to leave his machine, and he passed away.
René Descartes fundamentally freed humanity from the prison of ancient dogma. He taught us that absolute truth doesn't just come from old books, but from the raw power of our own reason. As the father of modern thought, he leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative question. Hearing my voice right now, taking in everything we've just talked about, do you still completely, 100%, trust what your eyes are showing you right now?